Just ring up the eggs, honey. I don't have all day. Look, I'm sorry. I know I'm being a bitch. I just haven't slept since Tuesday. You're probably wondering why a woman my age is venting to a 19-year-old at a checkout counter, but I honestly don't have anyone else to tell this to right now. It started about a month ago. I was in the garage, pretending to organize the tools, which is really just how I pace when I'm stressed. I dug through that disaster of a junk drawer, the one with the rusted screws and dead light bulbs, trying to find a single AAA battery for the emergency flashlight. While I rooted around, I stayed on the phone with the manager at the grocery store, arguing about a price discrepancy on some bulk detergent. I told him I could see the tag right there on the shelf and demanded the price it listed. Then, I slammed the phone down. Right as I did, I shifted Jonathan's old golf bag to get a better angle on the drawer. My hand brushed against something hard, and plastic tucked deep into the side pocket. I pulled it out, thinking it was a stray rangefinder or a forgotten wallet. It wasn't. I found a burner phone. It was a cheap, prepaid piece of plastic that didn't belong to me, and it certainly didn't belong in a golf bag he hasn't used since the spring. I stood there for a minute, holding it. The garage was hot, that thick Texas heat that makes the stucco walls feel like they're sweating. I didn't know why my heart was racing. Jonathan is a boring man. He's a project manager who likes spreadsheets and Friday night football. But as I looked at that phone, I started thinking about the money. In this town, everything is about the image. She just lifted her chin and said, "You see these massive dually trucks in every driveway with payments that probably cost more than my first house, all because everyone's trying to look like they're still riding the oil boom. Jonathan has one of them. He insists on the newest model every few years. I've always been the one to keep the ledger. I track every cent. I keep the receipts in a binder. I'll fight a cashier over 50 cents because that's how we survive when the property taxes jump. The county just hiked ours, and our savings accounts looks leaner than it has in a decade." I tried to ignore the phone at first. I put it back in the bag and went back to my battery search. But then I remembered something Brandon said. Brandon is Jonathan's brother, and he's always been a loose cannon. A few months back, at Sunday dinner, Brandon mentioned something about Jonathan diversifying his portfolio. He said it in that smug way of his, like he was in on a secret. I asked Jonathan about it right there at the table, and Jonathan just laughed it off. He told me Brandon was probably talking about some land in Midland that never happened. The timeline doesn't even make sense. Brandon mentioned it in April, but the burner phone looked brand new. It still had the plastic film on the screen. The discrepancy made the whole thing feel skewed, like I was missing a piece of a puzzle. For 2 weeks, I played a game. I didn't tell Jonathan I found the phone. Instead, I just watched him. I watched the way he'd take the phone into the bathroom or step out onto the patio to check the weather. Then I saw a post on the neighborhood Facebook group. The moderators there are basically unpaid spies who track every unfamiliar car parked in a driveway. They posted a grainy photo of a silver sedan parked 2 streets over, asking if anyone recognized the vehicle. I saw Jonathan's truck in the background of the shot. I started doubting my own eyes, wondering if I was just imagining a pattern where there wasn't one. I didn't want a dramatic blowout. I wanted a plan. I spent 3 days trying to schedule a legal consult with a family law attorney, but I had to fit it between my work shifts and the kids' schedules. It turned the whole thing from an emotional crisis into a practical logistics problem. I needed to know what happened to our assets before I opened my mouth. Jonathan started getting jumpy. Every time I asked about the mortgage payment or the status of our emergency fund, he'd just sigh and look at his watch. "Look, Rebecca, I've got it handled," he'd say. "Why do you have to track every single nickel? Just trust me for once." That trust me, or what really got me. I don't trust people who tell me to trust them when the bank statements look weird. I noticed small things. A missing few hundred here. A weird service fee there. I told myself it was just the cost of living in a boomtown, or maybe some hidden fee from the HOA. I prayed it was something boring. Then came last Thursday. Jonathan tried to clear the gutters on the side of the house. He's 58, but he still thinks he's 25. He lost his balance and took a nasty spill off the ladder, landing hard on his shoulder and head. I spent an hour shaking, calling 911, and trying to keep him conscious while he groaned about his arm. At the hospital, everything stayed fine until we got to the billing desk. The clerk was a tired-looking woman who didn't even look up from her computer. She asked for the insurance card, and Jonathan handed it over. She swiped it, paused, and then frowned. She tried it again. "I'm sorry," she said, finally looking at me. "There's a flag on this policy. It says it lapsed for non-payment 4 months ago. And there's a note here about a pending investigation into the claim's history." I just stared at her. I didn't say anything. I looked over at Jonathan, and he suddenly became very interested in the ceiling tiles of the ER. He wouldn't even look at me. The clerk cleared her throat. "Is there another provider? Because right now, this is all out of pocket." I didn't ask him how it happened. I just reached into my purse, pulled out my checkbook, and wrote the payment with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. As soon as we got to the car, I didn't say a word. I just drove home in total silence, thinking about that burner phone in the golf bag and the way the insurance company used the word investigation. I kept looping that word, investigation, in my head while I sat in the driveway. The engine ticked as it cooled down. Jonathan stared at me from the passenger seat, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept rubbing his shoulder and leaning away from me, acting like his physical pain was the only thing that mattered. I walked into the house without taking off my coat. I followed him into the living room and stopped right in front of him. "Jonathan, why did that woman say the insurance lapsed?" He didn't look up. He just fussed with the sofa pillows, trying to find a spot for his head. "I don't know, Rebecca. Probably a glitch. They mess up the billing all the time." 4 months, I said. "She said it lapsed 4 months ago. That isn't a glitch." He sighed, a long, heavy sound meant to make me feel like the unreasonable one. He finally looked at me, but his eyes stayed blank. "I've got a concussion. My head is pounding. I can't deal with this right now. I'll call them Monday." He didn't offer to show me the statements. He didn't explain where the money went. He just shifted his weight and turned toward the TV, ending the conversation. He always does this. The man of the house acted mixed with a sudden, convenient fragility. I stood there with my hands clenched at my sides, feeling the heat rise in my neck. I wanted to shake him, but he looked pathetic with that bandage on his head, so I just walked into the kitchen. While he watched the game, I pulled up the neighborhood Facebook group. I scrolled back to the photo of the silver sedan. I'd spent days obsessing over it, convinced it was some secret meeting spot. Then I saw a new comment from Brenda, one of the moderators who thinks she's the mayor of our cul-de-sac. "That silver car is just the new HVAC contractor for the Miller place," Brenda wrote. "He's been parking there all week." I stared at the screen. I felt a wave of relief, followed by a sharp sting of embarrassment. Maybe I was just losing it. Maybe the stress of the property taxes finally cracked me. The county just sent the new assessment, and the jump was disgusting. We didn't have the cushion for it. I'd been staring at our savings account for weeks, watching the balance dip in ways that didn't match our spending. I tucked the phone into my pocket and went to the small desk in the hallway. I opened the important folder. I don't trust Jonathan with the filing. He thinks a pile of papers on a dresser counts as a system. I flipped through the mortgage documents, looking for a missing check. My heart thumped against my ribs. I found the latest bank statement, but the principal balance looked wrong. It was too high. Way too high. I traced the line with my finger. A notation for a home equity line of credit sat there. Something I never signed. I didn't remember any meetings at the bank. I didn't remember a notary coming to the house. But there it was. A massive draw against the house from 6 months ago. I felt a sudden, sharp dizziness and leaned against the wall to keep from tipping over. My phone buzzed. The family law attorney's office texted me to confirm the consult. I stepped into the pantry to hide from Jonathan and typed back with shaking thumbs. I told them I could do Tuesday at 10 late a.m. But I had to be back at the store by noon for the midday rush. Scheduling my life around a potential divorce felt like trying to build a house during a hurricane. It was just another logistical nightmare. I walked back into the living room and saw Jonathan asleep on the sofa. His mouth hung open and the TV hummed in the background. He looked peaceful, which only made me angrier. I went back to the desk and dug deeper into the folder. I pulled out a stack of old mail he'd shoved into the back. Most of it was junk, coupons for tractor parts, flyers for the high school football boosters. But then I found a printed email. He had circled something in red ink. The email came from a company called Coin Ventures. The text mentioned liquidity events, seed rounds, and market volatility. It sounded like a foreign language. The email listed numbers, amounts that made my stomach turn. Thousands of dollars moved into accounts I didn't recognize. I didn't find a confession or a letter admitting he gambled our future. But I found a series of transaction IDs that matched the service fees I'd seen on our bank statements. Jonathan stirred on the couch. He groaned and shifted, his voice thick with sleep. "Rebecca, you still hovering?" I slid the paper back into the folder and shut it with a soft click. I didn't look at him. I walked toward the kitchen and started scrubbing a pot that was already clean. The sound of the sponge scratching the metal filled the silence. "Just cleaning, Jonathan," I said. He didn't respond. He drifted back to sleep, leaving me alone, with a folder full of numbers that didn't add up, and a house that didn't actually belong to us anymore. I stood there staring at the sink, wondering who the hell was actually on the other end of that burner phone. Listening to the water run, I stood still. A memory of my sister's comment from last week surfaced. She had seen Brandon's truck parked near the gym on a Tuesday, though Brandon claimed he was in Houston all week. That detail clashed with the timeline Jonathan gave me. The next morning, Jonathan beamed. He sat at the kitchen table with his arm in a sling, nursing a cup of coffee. He didn't look like a man whose insurance had lapsed while his house burned. "I've been thinking," he said, shifting in the chair and wincing as he adjusted his shoulder. "We've both been under a lot of stress. The property taxes, the house, my accident. I think we need to get away." Scrubbing the counter, I kept my back to him. "Get away where, Jonathan? With what money?" "We have a truck payment due on the 1st. He let out a small, airy laugh. "I handled it. I booked us a long weekend at the Four Seasons in Austin. Spa treatments, the works. I thought we needed a reset." Stopping the scrubbing, I turned around. A printed confirmation page sat next to his coffee. The numbers listed room service, a luxury suite, and dinner reservations at places that charged $50 for a small steak. "Where did this come from?" I asked. Jonathan swirled the cream in his coffee with a spoon. "I had some savings. A little bit of a bonus from the project I finished last quarter. I just wanted to do something nice, Rebecca. For once, can you just let me do something nice without making it a ledger entry?" Thoughts of the HELOC and the Coin Ventures email returned. Checking my phone, I saw a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group. The moderators had posted photos of an unfamiliar silver sedan parked 3 houses down. The car matched Brandon's. An hour later, Jonathan's burner phone buzzed on the nightstand while he showered. Picking up his laundry, I saw the screen light up with a text from Brandon. "The transfer hit the PTA account? Just make sure the treasurer doesn't run the report until after the weekend. We'll bridge the gap once the seed round closes." I stood there for a minute, holding a pair of his socks, staring at the text. As the treasurer's assistant, I helped Sarah manage the middle school athletics fundraising. The account covered jerseys, turf, and travel games. $6,000 or $7,000 were missing, enough for a luxury weekend in Austin. My hands shook. I remembered Brandon's comment from April about diversifying. He had spent months whispering about seed rounds and liquidity events, convincing Jonathan that a temporary loan from the PTA was a strategic move. Placing the phone back exactly where it had been, I walked into the hallway and sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. The shower stopped. A few minutes later, Jonathan emerged, smelling of soap. He paused when he saw me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice sounding breathless. "You look pale." Looking up at him, I saw his favorite Friday night football shirt. "I got a call from Sarah," I lied. "She said there's a discrepancy in the PTA funds. A few thousand missing." Jonathan froze. After a long silence, he turned toward the mirror and fussed with his hair, avoiding my gaze. He started, his voice trailing off. "I mean, honestly, Rebecca, it's not what it looks like. It's just a short-term bridge." Brandon explained it to me. "The Coin Ventures thing is about to blow up in a good way. We're going to put it all back before anyone even... It's just a temporary dip." "A temporary dip," I repeated. "You stole from the kids' sports fund to pay for a spa weekend." "It wasn't just for the weekend," he snapped, his eyes wide. "It was to keep us afloat while the investments matured." I did this for us. For the house. I didn't want you to worry about the property taxes. I was trying to fix everything. You didn't fix anything, Jonathan. You just made us criminals. He sighed and stepped back. You're overreacting. It's a small amount. Brandon says the payout is coming any day now. Just let it happen. Don't call Sarah back. Don't make this a thing. Without arguing or yelling, I stood up and walked past him. In the kitchen, I opened the important folder on the desk, took the printed email from Coin Ventures and the bank statements, and put them into a plastic zip-top bag. Pulling out my phone, I sent a text to the family law attorney's office to move the Tuesday 10:00 a.m. appointment to Monday morning, citing new evidence. Then, I opened my banking app. The joint savings account was nearly empty. With a few taps, I transferred every cent of my personal earnings from my separate account into a new individual account at a different bank. Jonathan stood in the doorway and watched me work. I closed the folder and tucked the plastic bag into my purse. I'm going to the store, I said. Rebecca, he whispered. Please. Ignoring him, I grabbed my keys from the counter and walked out the door. As I backed the car out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from the PTA group chat asked if anyone had time to help Sarah reconcile the June statements. I stared at the message, put the phone in the cup holder, and drove. I hit Kroger, but I barely bought a thing. Just a gallon of milk and some coffee. I've been tracking every single cent in this house lately, which usually makes me the bitch of the family. But when you're staring at a dwindling savings account, you do what you have to do. My mind kept drifting back to that PTA group chat. Sarah and the other moms were arguing over the equipment budget, and I just sat there staring at the screen. In a town where Friday night football is the only thing keeping people from staring at their layoff notices, stealing from the athletics fund isn't just a crime. It's social suicide. If Sarah found out I knew and I'd stayed quiet, they'd exile me from the bleachers and the bake sales faster than a bad crop. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, watching a neighbor pull his oversized Julie into the driveway. 3 houses down. I thought about how much of our life we spent pretending we belonged in that world. The world of massive truck payments and bonuses that didn't actually exist. Just as I was about to get out, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group. The moderators were already posting about an unfamiliar vehicle parked near the cul-de-sac. These people track every car that doesn't belong, and it made me realize how exposed I actually was. I felt this cold clarity. The anger stopped being a fire and started being a blueprint. Monday morning hit with a gray sky. I had to squeeze my legal consult in at 8 a.m. before my shift at the store started, which meant I barely had time to drink my coffee. The lawyer's office smelled like old carpet and burnt roast. Miller looked like he'd spent 30 years dividing up assets for every cheating spouse in the county. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He leaned back in his chair, looked at the HELOC documents, and sighed. He told me the house was essentially underwater. Between the massive draw Jonathan took and the property taxes jumping again, we didn't have enough equity left to breathe, let alone sell. He didn't just spend the money, Miller said, tapping a pen on the desk. He leveraged the roof over your head for a gamble. If the bank calls that loan, you're looking at a foreclosure process that starts faster than you can find a rental. I asked him about the PTA money. I told him I was the assistant treasurer and that my husband had borrowed $7,000. Miller's expression shifted to something like pity. He told me to stop talking to Sarah and start documenting every single transfer immediately. When I got home that afternoon, the house felt like a waiting room. Jonathan sat on the sofa, his arms still in the sling, staring at his phone. He looked up as I walked in with a hopeful expression that almost made me laugh. I talked to Brandon, he said, shifting his weight. He says the liquidity event is almost here. He just needs a few more days to move the funds back into the PTA account. We can just tell Sarah there was a banking error, a clerical mistake. I walked past him to the kitchen and started putting away the groceries. A clerical mistake doesn't involve a burner phone, Jonathan. He stood up, his face flushing. He stepped toward me, but he stopped when I turned around and looked him in the eye. He looked small. For the first time in 20 years, he actually looked small. Look, honestly, Rebecca, I was trying to save us, he snapped. Saw the taxes going up. I saw the layoffs at the plant. I didn't want us to be the ones losing everything. You already lost it, I said. You lost the house, you lost the money, and you lost me. He opened his mouth to argue, but then his phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen and his entire demeanor shifted. It's the draft, he whispered. The fantasy league draft is starting in an hour. I've got to get the laptop set up. I watched him walk away, completely absorbed in a game of imaginary football while our actual life was collapsing. The sheer vacuum of his awareness was the final straw. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just waited for him to leave the room. Tuesday was the day I stopped pretending. Jonathan had a draft party with a few of the guys from the project. Men who spent their weekends talking about their truck payments and their portfolios, oblivious to the fact that the man among them was a thief. As soon as his truck cleared the driveway, I started. I didn't use suitcases. I used the heavy-duty plastic bins from the garage. I moved through the bedroom with mechanical precision, folding my clothes and packing my jewelry. I grabbed the important folder, the bank statements, and the printed emails from Coin Ventures. I didn't take anything he had paid for in the last 6 months. I left the fancy new espresso machine he'd bought me for my birthday, probably paid for with some bridge loan, sitting on the counter. Moving the bins to my sister's truck in the driveway took 3 trips. I felt a weird sense of lightness with every box I carried out. The house, with its sun-bleached stucco and its hidden debts, felt like a skin I was finally peeling off. 10 minutes before he was due back, I walked into the kitchen one last time. I took my house keys off the hook and laid them flat on the granite island. I placed them right next to a printed copy of the legal notice Miller had drafted. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to explain that he hadn't already lied about. Walking out the front door, I didn't look back at the house. I just climbed into the passenger seat of my sister's truck and closed the door. Buster, our golden retriever, followed me to the edge of the driveway. He stopped at the end of the concrete, his tail giving one slow, confused wag. He looked at me, then back at the house, then back at me. He didn't bark. He just sat there, waiting for a command that wasn't coming. The truck pulled away, and I watched him in the rearview mirror. He stayed there for a long time, a lonely gold blur against the white stucco. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for trusting us with your story. I can't even imagine the level of betrayal you felt, not just from your husband, Jonathan, but from your own brother-in-law, Brandon. To discover that your home was leveraged and that funds were stolen from the kids' PTA account, all for a bridge loan and a luxury getaway, is absolutely heartbreaking. Rebecca's strength in those final moments, leaving the keys and that legal notice on the counter, was truly powerful. However, it leaves us with a very difficult moral dilemma to discuss. If you were in Rebecca's position, would you have reported the stolen PTA funds to the school board immediately to protect your own reputation and the children's sports programs? Or do you think walking away from the entire toxic situation was the only way to truly find peace? I want to hear your thoughts on this one. Please leave your advice for Rebecca in the comments below. If you found this story gripping, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a confession. We'll see you in the next video.